drill bit should have hit volcanic rock. Instead, at 30 meters deep, it brought up a high-tech anomaly that the history books say is impossible. In 2011, on a massive terraced hill in West Java, a team of geologists led by Dr. Danny Hillman Natawijaya stopped being scientists and became investigators. They were standing on Gunung Padang. For decades, the world was told this was a natural hill, a simple geological formation decorated with a few scattered stones. That was the official narrative. It was also a lie. When the team drilled into the core of the structure, they didn't find the random debris of a volcano. They found a complex, organized mixture of silica, iron, and clay. A volcanic mortar, a glue. It was holding together thousands of tons of hexagonal basalt columns in a deliberate multi-layered arrangement. This was not the work of nature, it was the work of an architect. The deeper the drill went, the more the official story began to fracture. They found rectangular chambers. They found evidence of massive human labor at a scale that predates the invention of the wheel. The ground beneath their feet wasn't a hill, it was a machine of stone, buried by soil and time, waiting for someone to finally ask why it was there. The truth is, we have been looking at the wrong side of the world for the origin of our species. We were told civilization began in the deserts of the Middle East, but the stones of West Java have a different story to tell. One that has been hidden in plain sight for millennia. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I want to know exactly how far these hidden stories are reaching. The drilling did not just find structures, it found a chronological death blow to every history textbook on your shelf. When the organic materials from the core samples were sent to the Beta Analytic Lab for carbon-14 dating, the results came back like a physical assault on the archaeological establishment. The top layer of the site was dated to roughly 2,000 years ago, entirely consistent with the official narrative of the Hindu-Buddhist era. But as the drill went deeper, the dates began to spiral backward in time, far past the reach of recorded history. At a depth of 15 meters, the lab confirmed a date of 10,000 years. At 30 meters, the evidence was undeniable, 25,000 years old. To understand the weight of that number, you have to realize that 25,000 years ago, the Earth was gripped by the last glacial maximum. According to the mainstream timeline, our ancestors were nothing more than nomadic hunter-gatherers, struggling to survive the cold, lacking the social hierarchy or the engineering knowledge to stack a single wall, let alone a massive multi-layered pyramid. The Great Pyramid of Giza is roughly 4,500 years old. Stonehenge is 5,000. Göbekli Tepe, often called the zero point of civilization in Turkey, dates back 11,000 years. Gunung Padang predates them all by a margin so vast it makes the Roman Empire look like a recent event. This is the wound in the story of humanity. If a sophisticated society was engineering massive stone structures in Indonesia, while the rest of the world was supposedly in a primitive slumber, then the cradle of civilization was never in the Fertile Crescent. It was here. And it was active at a time when humans were not supposed to be capable of organized thought, let alone massive construction. The data is clear, but the implications are so disruptive that they threaten to invalidate the career work of thousands of historians who refuse to look at the evidence coming out of the East. The investigation into Gunung Padang didn't just hit stone, it hit a wall of academic and political resistance. When Dr. Natawijaya and his team released their seismic tomography and ground-penetrating radar results, they weren't met with the excitement of a new discovery. They were met with a calculated attempt to silence the findings. Mainstream archaeology operates on a rigid foundation. If you challenge the date of the first civilization, you aren't just correcting a fact. You are dismantling the careers, the textbooks, and the funding of the global archaeological elite. The pushback was immediate. Petitions were signed by local archaeologists to stop the excavation. Professional skeptics claim the rectangular chambers were merely natural lava tubes, and that the artificial mortar was just a geological byproduct of volcanic weathering. But nature does not create 90-degree angles in hollowed-out chambers 30 meters deep. Nature does not produce high-grade silica mortar and distribute it evenly between precisely cut basalt columns. The resistance was not based on science, but on institutional inertia. The fear that the East holds a history that makes Western narratives of progress look like a late-stage revision. For years, excavation permits were stalled. The site was downplayed by those who realized the implications. If this structure is 25,000 years old, then the entire map of human migration is wrong. The narrative that Southeast Asia was a cultural backwater, only civilized by later waves from India or China, is a colonial fabrication. By refusing to acknowledge the depth of Gunung Padang, the academic establishment is participating in a deliberate erasure of the Indonesian people's ancestral legacy. They aren't just protecting a timeline, they are protecting a status quo that keeps the cradle of civilization firmly rooted in the West. The investigation into Gunung Padang forces a confrontation with a single, devastating question. Who possessed the geological knowledge to identify these specific materials and the social hierarchy to mobilize thousands of workers when, while the rest of the planet was in the grip of an ice age? We are not looking at a primitive burial mound. We are looking at a zero point of civilization that has been buried not just by soil and tropical vegetation, but by a rigid historical dogma that refuses to look east. The presence of this structure implies that a highly organized, technologically capable society thrived in the Indonesian archipelago over 20,000 years before the first stone was laid in Sumer. This is the unseen Indonesia. It is the shattered remains of a drowned empire that the world was never supposed to find. What we see today on the hills of West Java is merely the highest point of a much larger, submerged reality. As we move deeper into this investigation, we will uncover how this civilization was not just a local anomaly, but a maritime powerhouse that mapped the stars and mastered the oceans, while Europe was still locked in ice. The official history of our species is missing its most important chapter. To find it, we must look past the modern borders and the colonial maps. We must look into the black hole of Southeast Asian archaeology, where a catastrophic rise in sea levels swallowed millions of square miles of inhabited land, leaving behind only these silent, stone witnesses on the peaks of Java. This is the story of a civilization that was erased by water and kept hidden by men. And it is the story of the survivors who are still living among us today. The mainstream explanation for this site has always been a convenient dismissal. For decades, the archaeological establishment categorized these stones as a simple megalithic structure, built roughly 2,000 years ago during the Hindu-Buddhist era. They saw a hilltop decorated with volcanic rocks and assumed it was the work of a local tribe, a minor achievement of a young culture. This narrative was safe. It required no changes to the maps of human migration and no revisions to the established timeline of progress. In this version of history, the hills of West Java were a quiet corner of the world, developing slowly while the Great Pyramid and the ziggurats of Mesopotamia claim the title of humanity's first masterpieces. But this surface-level conclusion was built on an assumption, not an investigation. It ignored the thousands of hexagonal basalt columns that are not just lying on the ground, but are integrated into the very anatomy of the landscape. When you stand among these stones, you are not looking at a decorative site. You are looking at an engineering project of staggering proportions. The official story suggests these blocks were simply found and placed here by a primitive people. Yet the sheer volume of material and the precision of the arrangement point to a much darker, much older reality. The experts were looking at the skin of the mountain and calling it the whole story. They failed to realize that the stones they were cataloging were merely the final layer of a monumental structural stack that reaches deep into the earth. The megalithic mirage was a way for the world to stop looking, to accept a surface explanation, so they wouldn't have to confront the impossible truth resting just inches below their feet. And the investigation shifted from the visible to the invisible when the team deployed ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography. These tools do not care about historical consensus or academic reputations. They only record the density and the void. As the radar pulses traveled through the soil, they didn't return the chaotic, jagged signatures of a natural volcanic hill. Instead, they mapped out sharp geometric shapes and massive rectangular chambers, lying in total darkness deep within the core of the structure. Nature does not produce 90-degree angles in hollowed-out stone rooms 30 meters underground. The seismic data revealed a sophisticated internal architecture, a skeleton of stone that was deliberately designed to support an immense weight. These scans confirm that the hill is not a hill. It is a massive, man-made formation, a pyramid-like structure that was built in stages, each layer more complex than the last. The data showed distinct galleries and structural gaps that were intentionally created, likely to serve as rooms or passages. The mainstream argument that these are merely natural lava tubes falls apart when you look at the symmetry. The chambers are aligned with a precision that suggests a mastery of spatial planning. This technology, capable of seeing through the earth, has exposed a reality that the naked eye was never meant to find. We are looking at a subterranean blueprint that was drafted tens of thousands of years before the first cities were supposedly built. The ground is literally hollowed out by the intent of an unknown civilization, a fact that turns the natural hill theory into a documented falsehood. The investigation has moved past the point of speculation. The internal geometry of the Earth itself is now a witness against the official history. As the team began to map these layers, they discovered that Gunung Padang is not a single building, but a chronological stack of civilizations. It is a multi-layered reality where each new era of human history reclaimed the high ground and built directly on top of what remained of their predecessors. The site is divided into 4 distinct units. The top layer, which the world originally focused on, is the youngest. But beneath it sits a second layer of columnar rock, then a third, and finally a fourth layer that forms the very foundation of the site. This is not a simple construction, it is an architectural inheritance. Each layer represents a global reset, not a moment where a new group of survivors found the ruins of an older, more sophisticated culture and tried to mimic their work. The deepest foundations are the most disruptive. These are the sections carbon dated to 25,000 years ago. This suggests that the original builders were the most advanced, and as time moved forward, the technological capability of the subsequent layers actually declined. This is the opposite of how we are taught history works. We are told humans start simple and get more complex. Gunung Padang shows the reverse. A high-tech zero point at the bottom, buried under the less sophisticated efforts of those who came later. The site is a vertical timeline of a drowning world, where the most ancient builders possessed an engineering knowledge that their descendants could only dream of recreating. By building on top of the older stones, later cultures were not just seeking a strategic location, they were trying to connect themselves to a power and a history that was already ancient to them. They were living in the shadow of a drowned empire, building their smaller world on the bones of a giant. The final revelation of this structural investigation is the sheer weight of human intent required to create it. We are talking about thousands of basalt blocks, each weighing hundreds of pounds that had to be identified, cut, transported, and stacked with mathematical precision. In an era when mainstream history says humans were nomadic tribes chasing game across the tundra, this site proves the existence of a high-functioning social hierarchy. You do not build a multi-layered stone structure 30 meters high through accidental labor. It requires a specialized workforce, a stable food supply, and an organized leadership capable of planning across generations. This is the death of the primitive hunter-gatherer myth. The human consequence of this labor is staggering. Thousands of people lived, worked, and died to raise this monument on the West Java landscape. They weren't just surviving, they were communicating something to the future. They chose basalt for its durability, and they used a volcanic mortar to ensure the layers would hold for millennia. This was a message in stone, an assertion of existence from a civilization that knew the world was changing. When you look at the effort required to orient these stones toward the stars, you realize these were people who understood their place in the cosmos. They were engineers of the deep past, and their work was so massive that it survived the rising tides of the post-glacial world and the deliberate silence of modern history. Every stone on this hill is a testament to an organized human will that the textbooks say didn't exist for another 20,000 years. The weight of these basalt blocks is the weight of a truth that can no longer be ignored. The evidence standing on this ridge is not a geological accident. These thousands of hexagonal basalt columns are the silent witnesses to a prehistoric engineering feat that the current historical record cannot explain. While these shapes do occur in nature when lava cools, their presence here is the result of a deliberate selection process. In a natural volcanic field, you find these columns in a vertical, tightly packed formation. But at Gunung Padang, which they have been detached from their source, transported across the landscape, and laid horizontally like bricks in a massive wall. This is a clear indicator of human intervention. These stones did not grow out of this hill. They were brought here to form the skin of a monument. When you look at the sheer volume of these columns, the investigative reality becomes undeniable. Each block is a repeating geometric unit, chosen for its strength and its ability to lock together with its neighbors. The builders were not just picking up random rocks, they were sourcing specific architectural components. They understood that the hexagonal shape allows for maximum structural integrity with minimum gaps. This level of material science suggests a society that had moved far beyond simple survival. When they were looking at the raw volcanic output of the Indonesian landscape and seeing a modular building system. By hauling these massive stones to this specific summit, they were transforming a natural peak into a calculated statement of permanence. Every horizontal block is a rejection of the natural order and an assertion of an organized, technological will. This is the geometry of intent, a landscape rewritten by a civilization that viewed the earth as a raw material for their own enduring legacy. They were not just living on the land, they were using its most durable elements to construct a truth that would outlast the rising tides of their era. The investigation deepens when we look at what lies between these basalt columns. It is not just dirt or the debris of time. It is a highly specialized glue, a mortar that defies every rule of Ice Age technology. Analysis of this substance reveals a composition rich in silica and iron, a mixture that was intentionally created to bind the massive stones together. This is a prehistoric chemical signature that should not exist 25,000 years ago. To produce such a mortar, the builders had to understand the properties of minerals and the application of heat to create a lasting adhesive. This is not the work of a people who stumbled upon a construction method. It is the work of a people who had mastered the chemistry of their environment. This mineral adhesive is the smoking gun of a sophisticated engineering culture. It proves that the construction of Gunung Padang was a controlled chemical process. The presence of iron in the mortar is particularly disruptive to the official timeline, as it suggests a knowledge of metallurgy or mineral extraction that predates the Bronze Age by over 20 millennia. This was a glue designed to withstand the tropical rains and the seismic shifts of the Ring of Fire. It has held these layers together through thousands of years of global upheaval. By using this iron-rich mixture, The builders were ensuring that their creation would remain a solid, unified mass long after they were gone. This level of foresight and technical skill points to a society that had already solved the basic problems of architecture and moved into the realm of advanced material science. They were not just stacking stones, they were welding them together with the Earth's own elements. This substance is the physical proof of a high-tech zero point, a moment in human history where our ancestors possessed a mastery of the physical world that was later forgotten or erased by catastrophe. The orientation of these stones reveals a mastery of a different kind, a command of the heavens. Gunung Padang is not placed randomly on the landscape. It is a celestial instrument. The alignment of the terraces and the specific placement of the basalt columns suggest a deep understanding of astronomical cycles. The site appears to be oriented toward specific star clusters and the movements of the sun during the solstices. This implies that 25,000 years ago, the people of the Indonesian archipelago were already mathematicians and astronomers. When they were tracking the stars to navigate their world and to mark the passage of deep time, the stones were placed to reflect the order of the cosmos, creating a bridge between the earth and the sky. This celestial alignment is an investigative key to the mindset of the builders. They were not just building for the present, they were building in conversation with the universe. To achieve this level of precision, they would have needed a standardized system of measurement and a way to record observations over many generations. The shift in the Earth's axis over millennia means that the alignments we see today point to where the stars were in the deep past, providing an astronomical timestamp that correlates with the carbon-dated evidence. This was a society that looked at the sky not with fear, but with a desire to calculate and understand. When their architecture was an extension of their science. By anchoring their monument to the stars, they were ensuring that their cradle of civilization was part of a larger, universal narrative. They were maps in stone, blueprints for a humanity that understood its place in the solar system long before the invention of the telescope. This astronomical sophistication is the final piece of the geographic evidence, proving that the inhabitants of unseen Indonesia were the intellectual equals of any modern society, possessing a vision that spanned the horizons of both the Earth and the stars. The most grounding aspect of this investigation is the physical reality of the ascent. To reach the summit of Gunung Padang, every single one of those thousands of basalt columns had to be hauled up a steep volcanic incline. There are no nearby quarries at this elevation that could have provided this specific type of columnar rock. This means the builders were moving tons of material from lower elevations, dragging them through dense tropical terrain, and lifting them hundreds of feet into the air. This was a labor of extreme physical cost, a multi-generational effort that speaks to the absolute devotion of the people to this project. This was not a hobby, it was a societal mission. The land here is a witness to that struggle. The steepness of the slopes and the density of the jungle today give us a glimpse into the hostility of the environment the builders faced. They were operating during a period of global climatic instability, yet they managed to mobilize a workforce large enough to perform this Herculean task. This level of social organization implies a complex economy and a shared belief system that could sustain such a massive expenditure of energy. The human consequence is written into the very placement of the stones, the sweat, the strain, and the collective will of a people who refuse to let the landscape dictate their limits. They were a society that valued their monument more than their comfort, seeing the high ground as the only place where their history could be safe from the changes they saw coming. The ascent to Gunung Padang was a climb toward permanence, a physical rejection of the nomadic life in favor of a fixed, monumental identity. These stones are heavy with the memory of those who carried them, serving as a permanent record of a civilization that possessed the strength to move mountains in the name of their truth. To truly understand the mystery of West Java, we must first look past the modern map of 17,000 islands. During the Pleistocene, The geography of this region was not an archipelago. It was a unified, fertile landmass known as Sundaland. This was a ghost continent the size of Europe, a vast plain that connected Sumatra, Java, and Borneo to the mainland of Southeast Asia. While the northern latitudes were locked under miles of glacial ice, Sundaland was a tropical refuge, a stable environment with massive river systems and deep, nutrient-rich soil. It was the largest continuous area of habitable land on the planet outside of Africa. This was the true stage where the first chapters of human civilization were written, a landscape that allowed for the free movement of people, technology, and ideas across 1 million square miles. The official history of the world largely ignores this lost continent because it is no longer visible. By failing to account for Sundaland, the academic establishment has committed a massive geopolitical erasure. They treat the modern islands of Indonesia as isolated fragments rather than the mountain peaks of a drowned empire. This perspective is like trying to understand a city by only looking at its rooftops after a flood. The fertile valleys where agriculture likely began, the coastal estuaries where maritime trade was born, and the lowlands where the largest population centers would have stood are all gone. They are not just lost to time, they are lost to the ocean. This was a civilization that existed in the most primeval sense of the word. A collective of people who mastered a continent that no longer exists on any modern chart. When to find the source of the stones at Gunung Padang, we have to look into the abyss of the Java Sea. We have to acknowledge that the Cradle was not a desert, but a lush continental expanse that provided everything necessary for a sophisticated society to emerge tens of thousands of years before the rest of the world caught up. The end of this continental era was not a gradual change. The transition from the Ice Age to our modern climate was marked by a series of catastrophic events known as meltwater pulses. Between 14,000 and 7,000 years ago, the global sea levels did not just rise in a slow, predictable tide. Instead, massive ice sheets in the north collapsed, sending trillions of tons of water into the oceans in sudden, violent surges. In these windows of time, the sea level could rise by several meters in a single generation. For a civilization living on the low-lying plains of Sundaland, this was not a climatic shift. It was a recurring apocalypse. The ocean did not just creep up the beach. It swallowed entire provinces in a matter of weeks. The fertile river valleys were turned into saltwater marshes, and the forests were drowned where they stood. These meltwater pulses acted as a series of global resets, forcing the inhabitants of the Sunda Shelf to abandon their ancestral lands in a state of high-stakes survival. The investigation into the sediment layers of the South China Sea reveals the physical evidence of these pulses. Rapid shifts in salinity and massive deposits of land-based organic material now resting deep on the ocean floor. Well, now this was the moment the unified culture of the archipelago was shattered. As the water rose by a total of 120 meters, it cut off the land bridges and turned the plains into the sea. The people were forced to move toward the high ground, retreating into the volcanic mountains of Java and Sumatra as their world disappeared beneath them. This was the trauma that forged the survivors. They were a people who had witnessed the literal end of their world, an event so profound that it likely became the source of every great flood myth found in human culture. They were not primitive nomads. They were refugees from a drowned empire, carrying the remnants of their high-level engineering and celestial knowledge to the only places the water could not reach. The true tragedy of Southeast Asian archaeology is that we have been looking for the heart of civilization in all the wrong places. Because we are a land-dwelling species, we look for history on dry ground. But the most important infrastructure of the deep past, the harbors, the major cities, and the primary temples, is currently sitting under 60 to 100 meters of water. The modern islands of Indonesia are merely the high-altitude fringes of what was once the center of the world. This is the black hole of our collective memory. We find megaliths like Gunung Padang on the summits because those were the only structures durable enough and high enough to survive the submergence. They are not the beginning of the story. They are the final, desperate markers of a culture that was losing its battle with the rising tide. Positioning ourselves as investigators, we must recognize that the Java Sea is one of the largest archaeological sites on Earth, yet it remains almost entirely unmapped. The seismic surveys that reveal the hollow chambers of West Java also point to submerged anomalies on the Sunda Shelf. Geometric patterns and silt-covered formations that mirror the layout of continental cities. These are the physical remains of a maritime empire that functioned as a global hub long before the rise of the Mediterranean powers. The sophisticated mortar and the hexagonal basalt of the highlands were not local inventions. They were the refined technologies of a coastal people who were forced to adapt to a vertical landscape. The unseen Indonesia is a world of drowned architecture. Until we commit to the deep water investigation of these shelves, our understanding of human history will remain incomplete, limited by a bias toward the high ground. We are looking at a fragmented puzzle, and the most important pieces are resting in the silence of the deep, covered by millennia of ocean silt and the deliberate indifference of a scientific community that refuses to dive. The human consequence of the drowning of Sundaland was a mass diaspora that permanently altered the destiny of the Pacific. When the heart of the continent was swallowed, the survivors did not simply vanish, they scattered. This was a forced migration of a once unified population, a maritime culture that was pushed out into the fringes of the world. Some fled to the mountains, becoming the isolated tribes who still guard the old knowledge today. Others took to the sea, utilizing their mastery of navigation to seek out new lands. This diaspora likely seeded the early cultures of the Philippines, the Pacific Islands, and perhaps even the early civilizations of the Americas. The loss of the Sunda Shelf was the catalyst for the greatest maritime expansion in human history, born out of the necessity of survival. This fragmentation is visible today in the staggering diversity of the Indonesian archipelago. With over 1,300 ethnic groups, the region is a mosaic of a shattered whole. Each group carries a piece of the original Sundaland identity, the ship-shaped architecture, the celestial tracking, the respect for the durable stone. They are the heirs to a drowned empire, living on the remnants of a world that was broken by cataclysm. The trauma of the rising water is written into their DNA and their oral traditions. They speak of a time when the land was vast and the ancestors walked between the islands. This is not mythology. It is a documented historical memory of a geographical reality. The diaspora was the moment the cradle of civilization became a graveyard, and the survivors became the sea nomads and the mountain guardians. Their existence today is the final proof of the resilience of the people of the Sunda Shelf. They did not just survive the flood, they carried the light of their advanced culture into the darkness of the post-glacial world, ensuring that even if their continent was erased from the map, their spirit would remain in the stones and the stars of the islands that remained. The investigation into the cradle of civilization is now shifting from the weight of basalt to the microscopic record of our own species. We are moving away from the physical ruins on the hills of West Java and into the genetic code of the people who live in their shadow. Recent genomic studies of populations across the Indonesian archipelago have revealed a biological anomaly that the standard models of human migration cannot explain. When scientists mapped the DNA of modern Indonesians, they expected to find the clear signatures of the known expansion waves, the Austronesians and the Melanesians. Instead, they hit a digital wall. Hidden within the genome is a high percentage of genetic markers that do not align with any documented group in history. It is a genomic cipher, a fragmented message from a past that has been systematically ignored by mainstream science. This discovery proves that the history of this region was not a simple series of arrivals from the mainland. The DNA suggests that a highly distinct, deeply rooted population was already thriving in the tropical refugia of the Sunda Shelf long before the first official migrants arrived. These people were the primary inhabitants of the lost continent, a society that had already adapted to the unique challenges of the rainforests and the coastal plains of the deep past. By focusing only on the later waves of migration, historians have missed the most important part of the story: the original inhabitants. The modern Indonesian population is not just a collection of newcomers. They are the genetic descendants of the very people who hauled the stones at Gunung Padang. Their blood carries the record of a civilization that existed tens of thousands of years before the world began keeping count. This is the biological evidence of the 0 point, a lineage that survived the drowning of their world and integrated their advanced knowledge into the modern human story. This unknown lineage is what geneticists now refer to as a ghost population. It is a group of humans whose physical remains have largely vanished into the acidic soil of the tropics or the rising tides of the ocean, but whose presence is undeniably written into the living. And this ghost population represents an isolated early human group that evolved and flourished in the stable climate of Sundaland, while the rest of the world was locked in the glacial cycle. While Europe and Northern Asia were struggling through the extreme cold, the inhabitants of this tropical continent were developing unique survival strategies and complex social structures in a landscape of abundance. They were the silent architects of the first maritime technologies, the first celestial tracking systems, and the first monumental engineering projects. The investigation into these genetic markers suggests that Indonesia was not merely a destination for travelers. It was an evolutionary laboratory. The inhabitants were not primitive or stagnant. They were a sophisticated, organized society that remained isolated from the mainland for millennia, allowing for the development of a culture that was entirely indigenous to the Sunda Shelf. This is the unseen Indonesia at its most fundamental level, a biological reality that challenges the idea that civilization was a gift from the West or the North. The ghost of Sundaland is the proof that the heart of human innovation was beating in the tropics long before the first cities rose in Mesopotamia. The human consequence of this isolation was the creation of a high-functioning society that was perfectly synchronized with its environment. When the seas finally rose and swallowed their lowlands, these people did not disappear. They became the ancestors of the 1,300 ethnic groups that define the region today. They are the living evidence of a drowned empire, a population that has been hidden by the maps of the modern world, but remains visible in the very chemistry of their existence. The archipelago was not just a home for modern humans, it acted as a final sanctuary for alternative versions of humanity. The discovery of Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbit, on the island of Flores in 2003, shattered the idea of a linear, single-species progression of history. Standing only 3 feet tall and possessing a brain size similar to a chimpanzee, these individuals survived until at least 50,000 years ago, and potentially much later. They were not a primitive ancestor, but a parallel lineage that adapted to the island environment and thrived in isolation. The investigation into their existence reveals that the Indonesian archipelago functioned as a series of biological time capsules, protecting divergent human species that had been replaced or absorbed elsewhere on the planet. This diversity is the ultimate human anchor of the Hidden Regions investigation. It reveals a world where multiple types of humans shared the landscape, likely interacting and competing for the same resources as the climate shifted. The oral traditions of the Ebu Gogo on Flores, which describe small forest-dwelling people, suggest that the memory of these alternative lineages survived long after their physical extinction. Indonesia was a graveyard of lost human branches, a place where the cradle of civilization was shared by beings we can barely recognize today. The presence of these different groups implies a level of complexity in the deep past that the official narrative refuses to touch. While the rest of the world was becoming a monoculture of Homo sapiens, the Sunda Shelf and its surrounding islands were a vibrant, multi-species sanctuary. The loss of these lineages was not just a biological event. It was the closing of a door on a version of humanity that had mastered the rainforest for hundreds of thousands of years. We are looking at the ruins of a world that was far more crowded and far more interesting than the textbooks have ever allowed us to believe. The final layer of this biological investigation is the human consequence of the global reset. Approximately 74,000 years ago, the super eruption of Mount Toba created a volcanic winter that nearly extinguished the human race. Geneticists point to a population bottleneck during this period, where our species was reduced to perhaps only a few thousand individuals. Those who survived this near-extinction event in the tropical refugia of the Indonesian archipelago are the ancestors of everyone alive today. Indonesia was the genetic forge of the modern survivor. It was the only place on Earth where the climate remained stable enough to sustain human life through the 1,000-year cooling period that followed the eruption. The drowning of Sundaland was the second great reset. As the sea levels rose, these diverse human populations, the modern humans, the ghosts, and the alternative lineages, were forced into a direct conflict for the remaining high ground. The rising water acted as a filter, favoring those who possessed the maritime technology and the social organization to migrate and adapt. And this was the moment the Hobbit and other diverging groups likely met their end, pushed into extinction by the catastrophic loss of their habitat. The survivors were the ones who could build the ships and the stone monuments, the ones who carried the old knowledge into the mountains. The human consequence of these twin disasters is a profound sense of loss, but also a testament to incredible resilience. The people of these islands are not just living on a landscape, they are the survivors of a forgotten apocalypse. They are the end product of a biological struggle that lasted 50,000 years, a history that is written in their DNA and anchored in the stone terraces of the highlands. The cradle of civilization was bought with the blood of those who survived the fire and the water. And it is their story that we are finally beginning to uncover. The investigation into the origins of civilization in this archipelago eventually encounters an invisible barrier that is more significant than any mountain range or desert. This is the Wallace Line, a profound biological divide that runs between Bali and Lombok and between Borneo and Sulawesi. On one side of this line, the animals are Asian, tigers, elephants, and rhinoceroses. On the other, the fauna shifts entirely to Australasian species like marsupials and cockatoos. This is not a gradual transition. It is a sharp, clean break that has existed for millions of years. Geologically, it marks the edge of the continental shelves. Even during the lowest sea levels of the Ice Age, when Sundaland was a unified continent, the deep water trenches of the Wallace Line never closed. There was never a land bridge. This geographical anomaly is the smoking gun of our investigation. It proves that the unseen Indonesia was not just a place where people walked across dry plains. To move from the western side of the archipelago to the eastern side, you had to cross open water. For tens of millions of years, this deep-sea trench kept the animal kingdoms of Asia and Australia completely separate. Yet when we look at the archaeological record on the eastern side of this line, in places like Sulawesi and Flores, we find the remains of early humans. This means that our ancestors did something no other large land mammal in history could do. They crossed the abyss. The Wallace Line is the physical proof that the inhabitants of this region were not passive observers of their landscape. They were active masters of it, while identifying the limits of the land and deciding to go further. The presence of early humans in Sulawesi and the surrounding eastern islands is the definitive proof of intentional, high-level maritime engineering. This was not a case of accidental rafting on storm debris. To maintain a breeding population on these isolated islands, multiple groups of people had to make the crossing, likely carrying supplies and tools with them. This required a vessel, a stable, buoyant craft designed to navigate the currents and stay afloat in the open sea. According to the mainstream timeline, the first official age of navigation began a few thousand years ago. But the evidence in the Indonesian archipelago pushes that date back by 50,000 years. This realization dismantles the image of the primitive, land-bound ancestor. While the rest of the world was supposedly limited to the continents they could walk upon, the people of the Sunda Shelf were already offshore. They were building, testing, and refining maritime technology while Europe was still dominated by Neanderthals. The requirement of the vessel implies a sophisticated understanding of buoyancy, hydrodynamics, and structural integrity. It suggests a society that had already mastered the art of knot tying, wood shaping, and the use of natural resins for waterproofing. These were the world's first engineers of the sea. By crossing the Wallace Line, they proved that their civilization was not defined by the land, but by their ability to move across the water. This was an intentional expansion into the unknown, a leap of technological faith that reveals a level of bravery and organized planning that the history books have never dared to attribute to the deep past. To truly appreciate this feat, we must investigate the nature of the water itself. The gaps between these islands are not calm lakes. They are home to some of the most treacherous currents on the planet. The Indonesian throughflow moves massive volumes of water from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean through these narrow straits, creating unpredictable eddies and powerful surges. To cross these trenches 50,000 years ago, the navigators had to possess an intimate knowledge of the tides and the seasons. They had to be able to read the surface of the water and understand the invisible forces beneath it. They were navigating open ocean gaps that were often out of sight of land, meaning they were likely using the stars or the flight paths of birds to stay on course. These people were masters of the deep trenches. They were operating in an environment where a single mistake meant certain death, yet they succeeded in colonizing islands that had remained isolated for millions of years. This level of environmental mastery points to a culture that prioritized observation and the passing down of specialized knowledge. They were not just drifting, they were sailing with purpose. The currents of the Wallace Line acted as a filter, allowing only the most capable and technologically advanced groups to pass. The human consequence of this struggle was the creation of a seafaring elite, a population that viewed the ocean as a bridge rather than a barrier. They were the first humans to truly decouple themselves from the continents, proving that the cradle of civilization was not a fixed point on a map, but a mobile, maritime society that was already exploring the globe while the rest of humanity was still landlocked. The shift in perspective required here is massive. We are looking at the world's first blue water navigators, a society that had conquered the deep ocean tens of thousands of years before the Vikings or the Polynesians were even a memory. This realization changes the origin of global exploration, moving it from the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean to the tropical waters of the East. The inhabitants of the unseen Indonesia were the pioneers of the maritime world, and their ability to cross the deep water trenches of the Wallace Line is the primary evidence that Southeast Asia was the center of human innovation during the Ice Age. The human consequence of this maritime mastery was the early settlement of Australia and the surrounding Pacific Islands. The DNA evidence we investigated earlier confirms that these early seafarers were the ancestors of the first Australians, meaning the colonization of an entire continent was made possible by the technology developed on the Sunda Shelf. This was the first great maritime expansion in human history. The people of the archipelago were not isolated primitives. They were an interconnected, mobile society that used the sea to link distant worlds. By acknowledging the Wallace Line as a smoking gun, we are forced to admit that our ancestors were far more capable, far more curious, and far more advanced than the official narrative allows. They were the original explorers, the first humans to look at the horizon and see not an end, but a beginning. Their legacy is not just in the stones of Gunung Padang, but in the very fact that humanity reached the furthest corners of the earth long before we were supposed to know how to build a boat. The investigation into the cradle of civilization has reached a turning point that transcends stone and mortar. In July 2024, at a limestone cave site known as Layang Karampuang in Sulawesi, archaeologists confirmed the existence of a narrative scene that has effectively reset the clock on human intelligence. Using a high-precision laser ablation method to date the mineral layers covering the pigment, researchers found that this painting is at least 51,200 years old. This is not just a hand stencil or a simple geometric shape. It is a complex composition depicting a wild pig and three human-like figures engaged in a shared activity. This is the oldest story ever told, a piece of cinematic history captured on a cave wall tens of thousands of years before the first civilizations were supposed to emerge. By confirming this date, the investigation has moved from the physical construction of pyramids to the internal architecture of the human mind. 51 millennia ago, the inhabitants of this archipelago were already using art to communicate abstract concepts, passing down stories that were central to their social identity. The unseen Indonesia was the birthplace of the narrative, the moment when our species began to look at the world and represent it through a lens of imagination. This discovery proves that the intellectual capacity for complex storytelling did not begin in the caves of Europe, but in the tropical heart of the Sunda Shelf. The Layang Karampuang painting is the definitive evidence that the people of this region were not just surviving, they were reflecting, creating, and recording their reality. They were the world's first authors, and their work has survived the rise and fall of countless empires to tell us that the true origin of culture is far older and much further east than we were ever taught to believe. To create a narrative scene of this complexity requires a specific type of abstract thought that mainstream history claimed did not exist 50,000 years ago. The figures in the Sulawesi cave are not merely biological records of animals. They represent a relationship on a scene of interaction that implies a mastery of symbolism. This is the architecture of the mind, the ability to conceive of a story, to plan its execution, and to use pigments to anchor that story in a permanent medium. The builders of the 25,000-year-old structures at Gunung Padang were the descendants of these artists. The cognitive leap required to design a pyramid is the same leap required to paint a narrative scene. It is the ability to visualize something that does not yet exist and to bring it into the physical world through collective effort and specialized skill. The human consequence of this discovery is a radical shift in how we view our ancestors. We are looking at a population that possessed a fully developed imagination, while the rest of the world was supposedly in a primitive state. As the interaction between the human-like figures and the pigs suggests a society that was deeply attuned to its environment, yet capable of distancing itself from that environment through art. This level of abstract thought is the true zero point of civilization. It is the moment when humans stopped being just another predator and became storytellers. By analyzing the composition of the Layang Karampuang scene, we can see the beginnings of the social hierarchy and the shared belief systems that would later allow for the construction of massive megalithic sites. The art was the blueprint for the architecture. The ability to communicate a complex narrative allowed these people to organize, to plan across generations, and to build a unified culture that could withstand the shifting geography of the Pleistocene. They were mapping the internal world of the human spirit at the same time they were mapping the stars. The investigation must also ask why these narrative scenes survived in the tropical heat of Sulawesi when so much of our ancient history has been lost. The answer lies in the unique tropical preservation offered by the limestone karst. Over tens of thousands of years, the limestone has sweated minerals, creating thin protective layers of calcium carbonate, often called cave popcorn, over the pigments. This process has effectively shrink-wrapped the art, shielding it from the humidity and the acidic environment of the rainforest. This is a geographical accident that has allowed the cradle to speak to us across 50 millennia. It suggests that Southeast Asia was once covered in these narrative records, most of which have been destroyed by the rising sea levels and the rapid weathering of the tropics. Sulawesi is a rare window into a world that was once vibrant with color and communication. This preservation reveals that the archipelago was a center of early human communication, a landscape where knowledge was not just spoken, but visualized. The caves were the archives of the deep past. The fact that we find such advanced art in this specific region confirms that the inhabitants of the Sunda Shelf were leaders in human development. They were utilizing the natural resources of their environment, the iron-rich pigments in the stable cave walls, to create a permanent record of their existence. This was a deliberate attempt to defy the impermanence of the world. As an investigator, looking at these 51,000-year-old figures makes the official history of art look like a late-stage revision. We are not just looking at a painting, we are looking at the survival of the human voice from a time before the map of the world was even finished. The limestone of Sulawesi has guarded this truth, waiting for the technology of the 21st century to finally catch up and acknowledge that the first chapter of the human story was written here, in the heart of the unseen Indonesia. The revelation of the Layang Karampuang painting is a final, decisive displacement of the West. For over a century, the Eurocentric narrative of human progress has claimed that art, culture, and complex storytelling began in the caves of France and Spain, such as Lascaux or Altamira. These sites, dated to roughly 36,000 years ago, were held up as the proof of a creative explosion in Europe. But the Sulawesi evidence pushes that explosion back by another 15,000 years and moves it halfway across the globe. The intellectual origin of humanity has shifted to the east. The cradle of civilization was not a European or Middle Eastern invention. It was a tropical reality that predates every known Western achievement. This is the ultimate validation of the unseen Indonesia as the primary source of human innovation. The human consequence of this shift is profound. It forces us to reconsider the entire direction of human migration and cultural exchange. If the oldest narrative art is in Indonesia, then the old knowledge did not flow from west to east, but rather moved from the archipelago outward. The inhabitants of the Sunda Shelf were the teachers, among the navigators and the artists who seeded the rest of the world with the foundations of culture. The academic resistance to the dates at Gunung Padang and Layang Karampuang is a desperate attempt to hold on to a crumbling Eurocentric framework. But the pigments do not lie. The 51,000-year-old story on the Sulawesi cave wall is a physical rejection of the idea that Southeast Asia was a peripheral player in the human story. It was the center. It was the place where the human imagination first took flight, creating a narrative that would eventually span the oceans in the millennia. The investigation has revealed that the unseen Indonesia is not just a remote collection of islands, but the intellectual and spiritual home of the entire human race. The investigation into the heart of Gunung Padang eventually moves past the surface basalt and into the geometry of the void. When the research team processed the seismic tomography data, they were not looking at the solid, uniform density of a natural hill. Instead, the pulses of energy revealed three distinct, large-scale rectangular chambers sitting in total darkness deep within the core. These are not the jagged, irregular pockets found in volcanic geology. They are structured, hollowed-out spaces with clean lines and flat floors, some measuring over 10 meters in length and 5 meters in height. The data shows a level of symmetry that nature simply does not produce in the subterranean world. These chambers are positioned at various levels, connected by what appear to be vertical shafts or access galleries, while creating a complex internal architecture that has been sealed for millennia. This discovery is the ultimate validation of the man-made thesis. You do not find massive rectangular rooms sitting 30 meters below the surface of a natural volcanic peak. Their existence implies a level of advanced spatial planning that is completely absent from the official record of the Ice Age. The geometry of the void is a testament to the sophistication of the original builders, who had the technology to hollow out the mountain and the engineering knowledge to ensure the entire structure didn't collapse under its own immense weight. By creating these internal spaces, the architects of the unseen Indonesia were transforming a monument into an archive, a place where something of immense value could be protected from the elements in the eyes of the world. These rooms are the architectural proof that we are not looking at a mere pile of stones, but a functional, hollowed-out machine of history that was designed to endure the most catastrophic environmental shifts on the planet. As the data confirming these internal chambers became undeniable, the investigation hit a new kind of barrier: the bureaucracy of silence. Despite the global significance of a 25,000-year-old structured void, the permits required to physically enter or excavate these rooms were suddenly and systematically stalled. In 2014, a change in the political climate within Indonesia led to the suspension of the research, and a wall of administrative red tape was erected around the site. The official lieu was a need for further review of the methods used, but for those on the ground, the intent was clear. The investigation was getting too close to a truth that the establishment was not prepared to handle. The site was effectively locked down, and the internal chambers remained sealed, protected by the very government and academic bodies that should have been the first to open them. This political pressure is an investigative red flag. It suggests that the discovery of a pre-Ice Age advanced civilization is not just a scientific problem, but a geopolitical one. When you stall the investigation of a site that could rewrite the history of the human race, you are making a choice to prioritize the status quo over the truth. The human consequence of this silence is the continued erasure of the Indonesian people's deepest history. By keeping the chambers closed, the authorities are ensuring that the official narrative of a young, simple nation remains intact, untroubled by the reality of an ancient, superior predecessor. This is institutional inertia in its most transparent form, a calculated decision to let the silt and the vegetation reclaim the site, rather than admit that the maps of civilization have been wrong for a century. The bureaucracy has become the final layer of the pyramid, a modern addition designed to keep the most disruptive truths of the Cradle from ever reaching the light of day. The resistance to Gunung Padang is fueled by a specific, deep-seated fear of a new timeline. For the global archaeological elite, or the existence of a 20,000-year-old advanced civilization is a professional death sentence. If these chambers are proven to be the work of an organized society from the last glacial maximum, every textbook currently in use becomes obsolete overnight. Entire careers built on the Fertile Crescent theory would be invalidated. This is why the pushback has been so aggressive and so personal. The skeptics do not just argue against the data, they attack the credibility of the investigators, labeling them as pseudo-archaeologists to prevent the public from taking the findings seriously. They are defending a dogma, not a science. This institutional inertia is a global phenomenon that prefers a safe history over a real one. By insisting that humans were nothing but primitive hunters until 10,000 years ago, the establishment maintains a linear, comfortable story of progress that places the West at the center of the world's development. A 25,000-year-old pyramid in West Java shatters that comfort. It implies that the 0 point of technology was in the East, and that we have been living through a period of collective amnesia for the last 10 millennia. The fear of this new timeline is a fear of losing control over the human story. It is a desperate attempt to keep civilization within the narrow boundaries of the Holocene, ignoring the clear evidence that our ancestors were building monuments and mapping the stars, while the rest of the world was supposedly in a primitive slumber. The Cradle is being actively suppressed because it proves that the heights we have reached today were reached once before, by a people the world has worked very hard to forget. The final investigative question regarding these chambers is not just how they were built, but what they were meant to hold. We must view these internal rooms as a sealed archive, a time capsule designed to protect something from the catastrophic flooding of Sundaland. When you build a mountain of basalt and hollow out its core, you are creating a vault. The effort required to seal these chambers 30 meters deep suggests that the contents were considered vital for the survival of the culture's knowledge or its lineage. Whether these rooms contain physical artifacts, technological blueprints, or the remains of the founding elite, their purpose was to survive a global reset. The human consequence of these sealed rooms is a profound sense of an unfinished conversation. We are standing on top of a library of the deep past, yet we are being told not to look inside. These chambers are the final witnesses to the drowned empire, holding the answers to the black hole of Southeast Asian archaeology. By keeping them closed, we are choosing to remain in the dark about our own origins. The builders of Gunung Padang were people who knew the end of their world was coming. They were engineers of memory, stacking stones to ensure that their 0 point would not be completely erased by the rising tides. The tragedy of the modern era is that we have found their archive, but we lack the intellectual courage to open the door. These hidden rooms are the heartbeat of the unseen Indonesia, a silent reminder that the true history of civilization is not lost. It is merely waiting for a generation that is no longer afraid of the weight of the truth. The investigation into our origins eventually leads to the most violent event in the history of the human species. Roughly 74,000 years ago, the island of Sumatra was the site of the Mount Toba super eruption, a volcanic cataclysm so massive it defies modern comparison. This was not a localized disaster. It was a global extinction event that sent thousands of cubic miles of ash and debris into the upper atmosphere, blocking out the sun for nearly a decade. The temperatures across the planet plummeted, triggering an instantaneous volcanic winter that lasted for 1,000 years. This was the fire that almost ended us. The geological record shows a layer of ash covering vast portions of the Indian Ocean in South Asia, a gray shroud that marked the collapse of ecosystems and the mass death of animal populations. And for the human beings living through this era, the world became a cold, dark, and hostile void. The official history of our species usually skims over this period, but the environmental data is clear. We were nearly wiped off the face of the earth. The super eruption created a bottleneck that compressed the entire human population into a few scattered groups of survivors. Most of the planet became uninhabitable, a frozen wasteland where the food chain had effectively snapped. The investigation of this era reveals that our existence today is a mathematical miracle. We are the descendants of a tiny fraction of humanity that found a way to endure the unendurable. Mount Toba was the ultimate test of human resilience, a moment when the Cradle was forged in the heat of a literal apocalypse. The survivors were not just lucky. They were the most adaptable and technologically capable members of our species, and their sanctuary was the archipelago itself. While the rest of the planet was dying in the volcanic cold, the Indonesian archipelago became the only stable refugia on Earth. Because of its equatorial position and its unique maritime climate, the region acted as a tropical lifeboat. The surrounding oceans provided a thermal buffer that prevented the temperatures from dropping to the lethal levels seen in the northern latitudes. The investigation into the climate patterns of the post-Toba world shows that while the continents were drying out and freezing, the Sunda Shelf maintained enough moisture and warmth to support a living landscape. This was the only place where the forest didn't entirely vanish and the river systems continued to flow. This geographical reality is the reason we are here. The survivors of the Toba cataclysm were funneled into this tropical sanctuary, creating a concentrated hub of human intelligence and genetic diversity. The archipelago was not just a place to hide, it was the only environment where a complex society could still function. In this tropical lifeboat, the necessity of survival forced a rapid advancement in social organization and resource management. The people who lived through the 1,000-year winter in the shadow of the volcano were the ones who perfected the old knowledge. They were the ones who learned to track the shifting stars through the ash-choked sky and who mastered the maritime skills needed to move between the remaining habitable islands. This was the crucible where the unseen Indonesia was born. The isolation provided by the disaster allowed this population to develop in a direction entirely different from the rest of the world. They became a specialized, high-functioning culture that held the flame of humanity while the rest of the world was in total darkness. The biological proof of this era is found in the population bottleneck that exists in the modern human genome. Geneticists have long noted that humans possess a startling lack of genetic diversity compared to other primates, a fact that points to a moment when our numbers were reduced to perhaps only a few thousand individuals. The investigation of these genomic markers confirms that the genetic forge of our species was located right here in the refugia of the Sunda Shelf. This was the filter that refined the modern human story. Only those with the highest level of cognitive flexibility and physical resilience survived to pass on their DNA. This bottleneck is the reason why the inhabitants of the archipelago today carry such a unique and ancient genetic signature. They are the direct descendants of the people who were forged in the fire of Toba. Mainstream history ignores this reality because it implies that the cradle of all modern humans was not a slow expansion out of Africa, but a violent refinement in the East. The genetic data suggests that the survivors in the Indonesian sanctuary were the ones who developed the specific traits, the advanced communication, the complex social hierarchies, and the technological drive that we now define as human. We are all, in a biological sense, the children of the Toba survivors. And the genetic forge was a moment of forced evolution where a small group of people in a tropical sanctuary became the blueprint for the entire global population. By ignoring the role of the archipelago in this survival story, we are ignoring the very moment our species became truly modern. The islands were the laboratory where the human race was tested and rebuilt. The final human consequence of this volcanic reset is the realization that we are all descendants of the forge. The people who mastered the cradle during its most violent era did not just survive, they thrived. They emerged from the volcanic winter with a culture that was hardened by catastrophe and organized around the necessity of permanence. This is the origin of the impulse to build in stone. Sonny, when you have seen the sky turn black and the world freeze for 1,000 years, you do not build with wood and grass, you build with basalt. You build structures like Gunung Padang that are designed to withstand the Earth's most violent shifts. The ancestors of the forge were the ones who carried the memory of the fire and the water into the deep past. Their story is the ultimate human anchor for this investigation. They were a people who understood that civilization is a fragile thing, easily erased by the forces of nature. Their architecture was a protest against that erasure. Every stone terrace and every hollowed-out chamber was a way of saying we were here to a future they knew would be just as volatile as their past. The unseen Indonesia is the physical manifestation of that survivalist spirit, where it is the work of a people who had looked into the abyss of extinction and decided to build something that would outlast the stars. We are the heirs to that resilience. The blood of the Toba survivors flows in our veins, and and their monumental vision is still visible on the hills of West Java. They were the original architects of the human story, and their legacy is the only reason we are standing here today to uncover it. The investigation into the deep past of the Indonesian archipelago eventually collides with a force more destructive than any volcanic eruption or rising sea. This was the arrival of the Dutch East India Company, or the VOC, the world's first multinational corporation. Their objective was not exploration or the expansion of human knowledge. It was the total extraction of wealth. To achieve this, they had to perform a systematic dismantling of the indigenous history they encountered. They recognized that a people who are rooted in a 20,000-year legacy of maritime mastery and monumental engineering are difficult to submerge. Therefore, the colonial project required a scrubbing of the collective memory. They needed the inhabitants of these islands to forget they were the heirs to a drowned empire and to see themselves only as the subjects of a trading company. This corporate erasure was a calculated administrative process. The VOC didn't just seize the land, they seized the narrative. They replaced the ancient oral traditions and the complex social structures of the Sunda Shelf with a rigid, mercantile hierarchy. Any evidence of a sophisticated prehistoric culture was either ignored, buried, or reclassified as primitive to justify the necessity of European civilization. The human consequence was a profound displacement of the spirit. The people were disconnected from the stones of Gunung Padang and the stars of their ancestors, forced into a new reality where their only value was their ability to produce spices for a distant market. This was the beginning of the unseen Indonesia in a political sense, a history that was deliberately hidden to ensure that the labor force remained compliant and detached from their true ancient dignity. The extraction of nutmeg and cloves was accompanied by the extraction of the human soul from its historical context. The most violent manifestation of this memory extraction occurred in 1621 in the Banda Islands. To secure a total monopoly on the nutmeg trade, the Dutch forces, led by Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, initiated a genocide that effectively wiped out the indigenous population of the archipelago. This was not just a mass killing, it was a scorched earth policy against the cultural libraries of the East. The Bandanese were a sophisticated maritime society with deep-time connections to the original trade networks of Sundaland. By executing the village elders, the scholars, and the navigators, the VOC was destroying the living repositories of the old knowledge. They were burning the books of a history that had survived since the Ice Age. The silence that followed in the nutmeg forest was a deliberate void. With the original population gone, the Dutch repopulated the islands with enslaved laborers from other regions, people who had no connection to the land or its ancient secrets. This created a state of enforced amnesia that persists to this day. The new inhabitants were labor assets, stripped of their own histories and placed in a landscape they were never meant to understand. The genocide in the Banda Islands was the final blow to the unified memory of the Sunda Shelf. It was a clear message from the colonial powers. The deep past was an obstacle to profit. By turning the cradle into a plantation, they ensured that the voices of the ancestors would be drowned out by the tallying of ledgers. This was the moral weight of the colonial era, the decision to trade the heritage of the entire human species for a global monopoly. The land became a victim of a crime that was not just about territory, but about the right of a people to know who they truly are. And the colonial process of scrubbing identity was an ongoing effort to maintain a state of enforced amnesia. For centuries, the educational systems and the religious impositions of the occupiers worked to frame the Indonesian archipelago as a place without a significant history before the arrival of foreign influence. They taught the descendants of the world's first blue water navigators that they were discovered by the West. They framed the megalithic ruins on the mountain peaks as the works of spirits or giants, effectively delegitimizing the engineering genius of the prehistoric ancestors. This was the psychological cornerstone of the colonial era. If you can make a people believe they have no past, you can dictate their future. This scrubbing was so effective that even today, much of the academic resistance to the 25,000-year-old dates at Gunung Padang comes from within a framework established by these colonial masters. The modern investigator must confront the fact that our current understanding of the region is filtered through the lens of those who sought to exploit it. The people were turned into labor assets, their identities simplified, and their connections to the 0 point severed. This was a form of intellectual domesticity, where the vast continental vision of the Sundaland survivors was narrowed down to the borders of a colony. The human consequence was the loss of the genetic forge as a point of pride. The deep-time identity of the archipelago was replaced by a status of subservience, a historical trauma that left the islands fragmented and their history in shadows. To reclaim the unseen Indonesia, we must first acknowledge the depth of this scrubbing and the intentionality behind the amnesia that was forced upon the survivors of the drowned empire. The land itself has become a victim of this amnesia, a territory stripped of its ancient dignity to serve as a warehouse for foreign mercantile interests. When you look at the landscape of Indonesia today, you are looking at a terrain that has been carved up by the logic of extraction. Plantations, mines, and industrial zones that ignore the sacred geometry of the ancient builders. The colonial scrubbing treated the soil as a commodity rather than a witness. While this has led to a modern environment where the physical remains of the deep past are often viewed as inconveniences to progress, or as geological trivia rather than the foundations of a global human story. The land is mourning its lost history, covered by the scars of a corporate project that viewed its mountain peaks and river valleys only in terms of their output. Connecting this back to the human consequence, the modern Indonesian is a survivor of both a natural apocalypse and a man-made one. They carry the DNA of the Toba survivors and the seafaring elite, yet they live in a world that has tried to tell them they are newcomers to history. The enforced amnesia is a weight that suppresses the intellectual and spiritual potential of a nation. By uncovering the unseen Indonesia, we are not just doing archaeology, and we are performing a restorative act of justice. We are returning the land to its status as the cradle of civilization and the people to their role as the guardians of the old knowledge. The extraction of memory can be reversed, but only if we are willing to look past the colonial ledgers and into the basalt core of the mountains. We must recognize that the dignity of these islands is not found in their exports, but in their status as the laboratory where humanity was tested, refined, and launched into the stars. The victim of amnesia is finally waking up, and the truth they are discovering is enough to change the world. The investigation into the survivors of the drowned continent eventually leads us away from the excavated trenches and into the high, mist-shrouded ridges of the interior. Here, and in the isolated lands of the Toraja in Sulawesi and the hidden valleys of the Baduy in West Java, the old knowledge was not buried, it was lived. These groups represent the final strongholds of a prehistoric identity that refused to be scrubbed away by the rising tides or the colonial machine. They did not retreat to these mountains by accident. The high ground was a strategic choice, a sanctuary for a population that had witnessed the literal erasure of their continental home. By withdrawing from the coastal plains and the new trading hubs, they created a protective barrier around their most vital traditions, ensuring that the technical and spiritual memories of the post-glacial reset would remain intact for thousands of years. This architecture of displacement is the human answer to the environmental catastrophe of Sundaland. And whether Toraja and the Baduy are the living descendants of the elite navigators and builders who once governed the fertile lowlands. Their social structures, governed by strict ancestral laws, are designed to prevent the dilution of their history. They do not view themselves as mountain people, but as people of the sea who have been temporarily displaced to the summits. This perspective shifts the entire meaning of their presence in the highlands. They are not primitive tribes. They are the curators of a 20,000-year-old legacy, holding on to a way of life that was once the standard for a unified continental civilization. Their isolation is a deliberate act of preservation, a refusal to let the unseen Indonesia be forgotten. In these remote villages, the memory of the flood is not a myth, but a foundational reality that dictates everything from the way they plant their crops to the way they align their homes with the stars. The most striking evidence of this maritime heritage is found in the very shape of the homes they build. The Tongkanan houses of the Toraja are defined by massive, sweeping, curved roofs that tower over the landscape. While mainstream historians often dismiss these shapes as symbolic representations of buffalo horns, a closer investigative look reveals a far more technical reality. These roofs are not symbols. They are literal blueprints of the vessels that saved humanity from the drowning of the Sunda Shelf. The construction techniques used to build these roofs, the interlocking wooden beams, the absence of metal nails, and the specific curvature of the hull-like structure are identical to the naval engineering required for a blue water ship. These are boats that have been inverted and placed on land, serving as permanent memorials to the maritime technology that made the Great Migration possible. The vessel in the mountains is the final piece of the geographical puzzle. It tells us that the ancestors of the Toraja were not landlocked farmers, but master shipbuilders who viewed their homes as lifeboats. Every time a new Tongkanan is raised, the community is reenacting the survival of their lineage. The orientation of these ship houses toward the north is a navigational marker, a reminder of the direction from which their ancestors traveled as the water rose behind them. This is the living architecture of a forgotten apocalypse. It's by living inside the blueprints of their escape vessels, the survivors ensured that the knowledge of how to build, how to float, and how to navigate would never be lost, even if they were stranded on a volcanic peak for 10 millennia. This is the ultimate human anchor, a society that has turned its greatest trauma into its most enduring architectural achievement, proving that the cradle of civilization was built by a people who knew how to conquer the waves long before they ever learned to farm the soil. Beyond the physical structures, the social organization of these groups serves as a human shield for the old knowledge. Among the Baduy of West Java, there is a sharp division between the outer community and the inner guardians. The inner Baduy live in a state of total technological and cultural isolation, rejecting modern education, electronics, and even the use of machinery. This is not a lack of progress. It is a calculated decision to protect the technical and spiritual memories of the post-glacial era. They are the guardians of the sealed way, maintaining a lifestyle that mirrors the conditions of the original survivors who first reached the high ground. Their primary mission is to maintain the balance of the land, a duty they believe was handed down to them by the first builders of the megalithic sites. This level of commitment reveals the weight of the responsibility they carry. They believe that their continued adherence to the ancient ways is the only thing preventing another global reset. For the Baduy, history is not a linear path forward, but a cycle that must be carefully managed through ritual and restraint. They are the human archives of the unseen Indonesia, keeping the prehistoric fire burning in a world that has largely moved into the darkness of amnesia. By refusing to adapt to the modern world, they have ensured that the original frequency of the Sundaland culture remains audible for those who know how to listen. Their existence is a challenge to the powers that seek to control the human narrative. They prove that the history of the archipelago is not a collection of dead artifacts, but a living, breathing continuity that has survived the fire of Toba, the water of the meltwater pulses, and the greed of the colonial era. They are the silent witnesses to the truth, waiting on the summits for the rest of humanity to remember its origin. The final investigative truth of these highland communities is that they represent a living record of the flood. Every aspect of their existence, from the elaborate funeral rites of the Toraja to the strict environmental codes of the Baduy, is a response to the transience of the world they once knew. They live every day in the shadow of a forgotten apocalypse, and their culture is the mechanism they use to cope with that memory. The human consequence of this lifestyle is a profound sense of permanence. While the modern world builds for the next decade, these survivors build for the next 10,000 years. They understand that the land can be taken away in a single generation, but the old knowledge can be carried forever if it is woven into the fabric of daily life. Connecting this back to the cradle of civilization, these ship houses and guarded traditions are the proof that the people of the archipelago never truly lost their mastery of the world. They simply moved it to where the water couldn't reach. The Toraja and the Baduy are not historical curiosities. They are the primary sources for the investigation into the deep past. They offer a perspective that the archaeological establishment cannot provide. A human-centered account of what it means to survive the end of a continent. Their presence on the ridges is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the durability of the maritime culture that first crossed the Wallace Line. The unseen Indonesia is finally visible in the curve of a roof in the silence of a mountain village. It is a story of a people who refuse to drown, who carry the blueprints of their greatness into the heights, and who are still waiting for the world to acknowledge that the first ship was built here, the first story was told here, and the first civilization is still living here, just above the clouds. The investigation into the origins of our species has arrived at a final, inescapable conclusion. Indonesia is not a young nation struggling to find its place in a world defined by Western progress. It is the shattered remnant of a 50,000-year-old 0 point, the original source of the human imagination and the technological drive to conquer the unknown. From the 51,200-year-old narrative art in the caves of Sulawesi to the 25,000-year-old basalt chambers buried in the hills of West Java, the evidence forms a unified timeline that the official record cannot accommodate. When this is the birthplace of the human story, a landscape where our ancestors were mapping the stars and building for the future, while the rest of the world was supposedly in a state of primitive survival. By connecting these fragments, we see a civilization that was once the global center of innovation, a maritime empire that was the first to bridge the gaps between the continents. This paradigm shift forces us to look at the Indonesian archipelago not as a collection of islands, but as the mountain peaks of a drowned continent. The unseen Indonesia is the foundation of the modern world, the place where the genetic and cultural blueprints of humanity were first tested and refined. The rejection of this evidence by the global establishment is not a scientific failure. It is a refusal to admit that the cradle was never in the desert. Why, it was always here, in the humid air and the volcanic soil of the Sunda Shelf. To accept this truth is to accept that our history is far longer, far more complex, and far more Eastern than the textbooks have ever dared to admit. We are the heirs to a legacy of incredible resilience, a population that has survived the fire of the supervolcano and the rising tides of the Ice Age to tell us who we truly are. The human consequence of this denial is a profound weight carried by the people of these islands. To live in a nation whose very foundation is dismissed by the global academic elite is to exist in a state of historical gaslighting. The descendants of the world's first engineers and master navigators are told their history begins with colonial arrivals or medieval kingdoms, while the proof of their 20,000-year-old mastery sits right beneath their feet. This unacknowledged truth creates a unique tension in the identity of the archipelago. It is the resilience of a people who know their own depth but are told by the world to stay on the surface. They have held the old knowledge in their ship houses and their mountain sanctuaries, waiting for a time when the evidence would become too loud to ignore. This resilience is the true heart of the Cradle. It is the spirit of a population that refuses to let the corporate ledgers or the colonial narratives dictate their value. They understand that the stones of Gunung Padang and the pigments of Liang Karampuang are not just archaeological curiosities. They are the birthrights of every human being who seeks to understand our shared origin. The weight of the unacknowledged is the weight of a truth that has been suppressed to maintain a comfortable, Western-centered story. But as the investigation deepens, that weight is shifting. The people are reclaiming their role as the guardians of the original flame, the survivors who stayed behind to keep the records of the deep past. Their dignity is not found in the approval of distant institutions, but in the internal realization that they are the architects of the human story. The silence of the past is finally being broken by the voices of those who never forgot where they came from. The investigation concludes with an urgent environmental reality that connects the deep past to our immediate future. The ancient drowning of the Sunda Shelf was not a one-time event. It was a cycle that is currently repeating. And as the global sea levels begin to rise once again, the very land where civilization began is being reclaimed by the abyss. The coastal plains that hold the remains of the first maritime harbors and the river valleys where the old knowledge was first applied are disappearing under the waves before we can even admit they existed. The Cradle is being swallowed by the same ocean that once nurtured it, creating a race against time that the world is currently losing. This rising tide is a physical reminder of the transience we have investigated. The survivors of the Pleistocene knew that the land was a temporary gift, which is why they built their monuments on the summits. Today, the modern world is facing a similar reset, yet we lack the long-term vision of the original builders. We are losing the physical evidence of our 0 point to the same forces that erased the continent of Sundaland. Every inch of sea level rise is another layer of silt covering the chambers and the caves that hold the answers to our existence. The investigation has revealed that we are not just looking at history, we are looking at a warning. The ocean does not care about our academic debates or our political boundaries. It only follows the cycles of the earth. We are standing on the edge of a new amnesia, where the most important discoveries of the human race are being buried once again, leaving us with a vanishing window to understand the world's first civilization before it returns to the silence of the deep. The final silence of this investigation is the most disruptive truth of all, and we have uncovered the evidence of a 50,000-year-old story, the blueprints of a maritime empire, and the genetic forge of the human species. Yet the official record remains unchanged. The chambers of Gunung Padang stay sealed, the excavations are stalled, and the global maps continue to show a world that began only 10 millennia ago. There is an unresolved tension between what the land is telling us and what we are allowed to believe. The unseen Indonesia remains unseen not because the evidence is missing, but because we lack the courage to look at it. The investigation has reached the limit of what data can provide. The rest is a question of human will. As the sun sets over the basalt terraces of West Java, the mountain remains a silent witness to a history that exceeds our understanding. The clock is running out, and with every passing year, the humidity, the vegetation, and the rising tides move closer to reclaiming the Cradle for good. We are living in a brief moment of clarity between two great silences. The first was the silence of the drowned continent, and the second is the silence of our own indifference. If we do not act to uncover and protect the secrets of these islands, we will remain a species without a memory, forever repeating the same cycles of rise and fall without knowing why. The final verdict is not written in a book, but in the soil and the stone of the archipelago. Indonesia is the beginning of us all, a 50,000-year-old truth that is waiting for the world to finally listen. The investigation is over, but the mystery remains anchored in the deep, waiting for the next tide to turn.